Okay, let's see. Give me a second. This is serious stuff. There's quite a few contenders here. Quite a few people. And this is no joke. This is the cash flow for kids. A game you cannot buy off the shelf in any shop. You'd have to buy it from America. And I have a game over here where someone is going to get their hands on it. Okay, it's based on interaction. Okay, and the winner is, ladies and gents, I'm not going to announce it just yet. We're going to do Q&As, and then I'm going to come back to it. How cool is that? We're going to do Q&A, and then we're going to come back to that. So you're all going to have to stick around right to the end to see who's going to win. So I'm going to move a few things around here for you. So I'm going to stop the share on that. And I'm going to ask my team to come online with me. And I'm going to share. I'm going to put this slide over here. And we're going to come back to that slide. Just to get the suspense going, right? Who's going to win the game? There's a few of you. Who could win. There's a few contenders. So let's see how we get on in the Q&A session. So let me just get my team on here. Let me just put that full screen. Okay, get back to here. So where is my team? So Nico, I might actually get you on board because you're from the brokerage. You deal with estate agents all the time. Excuse me. And I've seen quite a few general questions while we wait for Leonora to come on board. Robin Booth is joining us in 9 minutes. So let's get yourself and Ross on, and then we'll choose the winner. Okay, so I might as well start with you, hey, Nico. Is that cool?
No problem. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. So there's a lot of questions, ladies and gents, like, geez, man, if I go down here, there's over 100 questions. There's quite a few similarities between some of the questions. So what I want to do is I'm going to ask Nico a few questions. Let's get Ross back on. I'm going to ask Ross a few questions. Add Hoppos too. Robin Booth's very busy this afternoon. So I want to fire a few questions at Robin, and then I'll come back to Nico and Ross. Okay, let me bring this over here. Alrighty. Jesus, a load. Okay, Nico. So Makati was asking, can we use our own offer to purchase documents instead of the estate agents? And how do we edit the one we get from the agents?
Cool. Yeah, no, that's an interesting one for Makati. I think that if you have confidence in your own OTP, then you can use it. But I would definitely still suggest that it's actually been checked by an attorney to make sure that it covers everything that you need to check. And please also just remember, right? At the end of the day, you can't use one OTP for all transactions. Every transaction is going to be looking different. And if you don't understand or you don't know that the clauses that you're adding to your document is accurate and correct, I'm not going to advise you to use it. Then I will say rather do a consultation with an attorney, get it sorted out, make sure it's fine, and then submit that OTP.
Okay, cool. So Makati's asking Ross, do you open a trust fund for a deposit that have interest for tenants like PayProp? So do you open a trust fund for deposits that have interest for tenants like PayProp? Ross?
Yes, so can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we definitely do. So we regulated by the EAB, so we have to open accounts when we do the deposit collection. So it's within a trust account, and all the interest accumulates to the payments.
Cool. So the answer is yes. Ross, does preferential help in back room rentals?
So I saw the back room and multi-lets. So yes, we've got a couple of clients who've got the multi-lets. So preferential rentals pricing is based on the agreement. So we need to evict the tenant if there's default on rental collection. So the pricing would then be per lease agreement. If you've got multiple tenants living in a single property or single room and they apply together, that'll be a single lease. But if you've got multi-lets with 5 rooms, individual tenants, there'll be a a charge per lease agreement, and the only reason for that is if we do the eviction, there's certain cost involved with that, so we would have to evict on the lease.
Okay, brilliant. Nico, back to you. How do we add those special conditions and suspensive conditions on the OTP of the agent?
Well, that's easy. You write it in. I think at the end of the day, you physically have to write them in, or you actually send them to the estate agent and ask them to add it to the document and send it back to you. Just be sure that you know, once again, that the suspensive condition you want to put in is worded correctly, and you ask them to insert it as you would wish it to be inserted.
Excellent. And tell me, Nico, and someone was asking, why are the agents so tight when you want to change their OTP and insert clauses to cover yourself? What are they so afraid of?
So I think it comes down to quite a bit of things. There is sometimes certain, how can I say, what is the right word that I'm looking for? I think they're sometimes scared to go out of their own comfort zone. They know their current documentation and they don't want to make changes because they don't know the impact of it. It might be a company policy that they have within the estate agency firm that they're working for. So that I think is the most of the time the situation. They don't want to change, the information or, how they were taught to do it, and then they don't know.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that, right? They're uncomfortable, they're not sure, and they're used to doing things. Although most agents are used to working with first-time buyers, right? Where everything is just straight to the bone, very simple, and then investors come along, want to add in different clauses, and it kind of throws them out. And that is why when you work with agents, you've always got to give them a bit of education, set the scene up front, and don't tell them that you're changing a suspensive clause or adding a clause at the time. When you're viewing the property, let them know that you're probably going to make some changes. And if there's a problem, let me know now. Okay, let me jump. So Dave, there's a question for you. I'm going to ask Ross a couple of questions. And then I want to ask Dave about how accurate are the historic sales on property 24. But Ross, there's a question here from Audrey. I know there are fees to private property and private. So property 24. So the wording's the wrong way around here. Property 24 and private property to list your property. How will these fees be affected if we use preferential, or how does it work through preferential?
So with the SAPIN members, basically get a 50% discount. So on these listing portals, I think property 24, you start off with 199 Rand a month per ad. Private property has got 2 or 3 listings free and within a certain period of time, and then after that you pay an amount of, I think, 295. The Gumtree is for free, but you do get a lot of weird applications from Gumtree. IOL and property 360, I think the charge there is about 350, 400 per listing portal. So with preferential, we charge you 175 Rand. We've built the integration with these listing portals. So the lucky thing is you get on your website or your dashboard, you provide your property details once off, and with a click of a button, it's live on all 5 portals at a cost of 175. And then obviously with a partnership with SAPIN, there's a 50% discount for property investors to advertise their property through preferential. So that's another massive saving on that. So you'll probably end up paying around about 85 Rand to get your property exposed to these 5 major listing portals. So we've done the integration, we've created a cost saving, we're literally passing that on to the landlord.
Okay, cool. And then Ross, another question here from Audrey again. Who attends to day-to-day issues like noise complaints caused by a tenant?
So typically our landlords who deal with the tenant, those type of issues, but we do have a package for landlords where we can activate that service, where preferential would then basically take on that full management of the tenant. So the landlord, we've got a couple of landlords who're super busy, they just can't get to this, and they basically ask us to activate that service for them, and we manage the tenant communication on their behalf.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, the question for Dave was, how accurate is that historical sales on property 24?
So the property 24 isn't something I'm super familiar with, but at the end of the day, as with most of those reports, Lightstone, Indeed, CMA reports, they all generally pull historical sales from the deeds office. So other than the slight delay that you get because of the length of time of deed registrations, it's pretty much legally what's happened and what went on.
Absolutely, eh? Okay, cool. Just team, let me know when Robin does join. He's joining at 2:30. He is a bit tight for time, so when he does come on, which is coming on right now, perfect timing. I'm going to jump straight into Robin's, but just before Robin does, is Robin there? Let me see. Hey, Robin, just talking about you, man. Are you staring at that sea again, eh?
Yes, it is. The swell's picking up. Yeah, busy day. But you know what's actually great, Andrew, is while I was having that session with you, the systems worked, and I've just got that lease for the same property that I was sharing with you. So how's that? Eh? Just like actually this call, and there it was happening. So it was great. Just your message sorted out, applications going through.
Awesome,
Proof.
Which is brilliant,
Yeah.
eh? So Robert, for this section, I'm conscious of your time here as well. There's a lot of these comments or questions. Actually, a lot of these questions will also be answered within the Airbnb course that you've got. And I don't think many people even know what we're talking about because there's a few newbies on this course. So I'm going to ask you a question here from Makati. How to find an area, how to find if an area is good for Airbnb. So maybe answer that question and maybe talk about a little bit about the Airbnb course for the people that have never heard about it.
Right. So, a lot of people kind of understand what Airbnb is about. That is really that there's a traveler, whether it's business, pleasure, tourism, but someone wants to go to another location, another city, a town, country, and they don't know where to stay. They go onto Airbnb. They look for a place that meets their requirements, and they can book online. Everything is done in a certain way that the money is taken. There's no funny change of hands, etc. And what's so exciting about us as property investors in the Airbnb world is this is an opportunity like no other for investors to actually take advantage of a demand. There's people wanting to stay somewhere, whether it's one night or a lot more. And what we've been talking about, like with the systems that you're sharing, is how can we investors learn how to take advantage of this demand such that we can put our own houses or our own apartments or investment buildings onto Airbnb so that we generate money. Or, as you know, one of my favorites is the rent-to-rent model, which is I might not have a whole lot of money, so how do I rent an apartment from someone and put it on Airbnb so that I don't even have to pay millions of rands for the apartment, but I manage it in such a way that I generate profits. And you've seen that even in our free courses, we're showing how actually we're generating tens of thousands of rands and we don't even own the apartment. So the question that you're asking, well, how do we find these properties? Well, we use systems, right? Of course we do. We use systems and spreadsheets or tools out there to make it easy for us so that we're not speculating. I don't like risk. I want to calculate so that I'm fairly secure and sure in what's going on. And as you mentioned, the Airbnb course has the kind of like introductions, got the part 1 and the advanced part, all about how to find those properties, how to use the tools that are already out there for free that you can access to look for properties that you can rent, properties that you can buy, and of course how to dominate your competition is what I say. So definitely, if people here don't know about it, they must go onto your platform, take a look at those courses and get going, because it's a way of investing that a lot of investors just have not taken advantage of.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Robin. And a question from Makati again, saying, yeah, Robin, if I have a 3-bedroom house, the lounge and dining room is the kitchen, how can one change that into a multi-let? Can I abolish those rooms, the dining room and the lounge, and make them bedrooms and let them share the kitchen? What is the process one should follow?
So it's a wide conversation, and first and foremost, though, is just to also get a distinction between the multi-let and a communal living. If people are sharing common spaces such as kitchens, bathrooms, then you're looking more at a commune, which is quite different to a multi-let in our definition, at least on this conversation. You might have many different leases, such as in a student house, but that, from what this person has just shared, I would see that more as a commune. But the concept is going to be pretty much the same. You want to see if it's possible. So you want to see what your zoning regulations are, if there's challenges with certain restrictions on the title deeds. But that's exactly why you engage people like yourself, Andrew, is you want to check with a professional so you don't go and spend 400,000 Rand on doing this only to realize that you can't and then have to undo it, and over and above that, get penalized. And some municipalities are very strict on that. They'll come and say, you're now operating as a business, no longer as a general house, as a residence, right? And therefore, they're going to go back and backdate you on your rates, and they're going to charge it up to 10 times what you're currently paying. So there are a couple of pitfalls you want to avoid there. And again, go and get the expert advice and knowledge so that you don't make those mistakes.
And tell me, Robin, Natalie was asking, what's the price of water meters, please?
So the average water meter out there is going to be between 2,000 and 2,500 Rand just to buy the meter. And then you're probably going to maybe 1,000 Rand for a plumber to install it. That's just a simple one. The electric meters are a lot cheaper. They actually can be between 200 Rand to 700 Rand to actually buy as the actual meter. I don't know why they're initially making them so expensive, because I would like to think that they're selling them cheap because they're taking their little portion on the back end. But that's how much it costs. And when you start to have 15, 20 units on a property, you suddenly see that cost come quite quickly. So you want to make sure you're doing it right.
Exactly. And Robin, question here from Natalie. Robin, what's your take on Elsie's River and also Eerste River, please? Don't you struggle with the rent in those areas?
So I think let me put it this way. If I was in whatever suburb we want to invest in, and I put in rentals below market value, then I will get easier rentals. If I go into somewhere like Elsie's River and I charge 35,000 Rand a rent, I don't think I'm going to get any takers. So it's never about does one struggle to get rent. It's going to be more around, are you marketing or offering your unit at a price which is competitive? And more importantly, if anyone knows the kind of work I do, it's always around, are you providing more value for that amount of money than anyone else of your competitors? And if that's the case, then you're going to get rentals a lot easier. Where the risk is if you go into some of these lower income properties and you overcapitalize. In other words, you start saying, I'm going to put in this and put in that, and then you put a lot of money into your refurbishment, then you're not initially going to get what you think you could get. And I actually did have that feedback from one of our agents who said, Robin, if you could just pick up this house that you've done here and put it 2 suburbs across the way, you'd get a lot more money. So that is true. But at least in my case, because I know my numbers well, that even with the reduced rental, it still is a high yielding property and I'm still going to make my money. But again, you need to know your numbers.
Absolutely. And I think last one for you, Robin, was around your online leasing application. Can you recommend one? Justine was asking.
So what I would be looking for if I was starting from scratch in this so-called online leasing is we want something which we can use digital signatures, which tracks where documents have been sent, who has completed it, can auto remind them if that document hasn't been opened, and that can be sequential. In other words, first send the lease to me to fill in, then when I've completed it, send it to the next person, and if they've completed it, send it to the next person. So those are the prerequisites, and most of these kind of software, or if they're all online. What's also really important is you need to prescribe, or this is what you need to have when you're selecting them, to prescribe where tenants must sign or what they need to know. So in other words, it can't just be a blank document that says, look for clause 5 and please initial there next to it. I like to dummy proof everything I do. So when a tenant gets my lease, I have told them, it flags up and says, here is where I want you to sign, and the tenant goes and rubs their finger. This is what I want you to read. Have you read it? And they must sign that. So I tell exactly where it must be, because one of those things that is so frustrating in the lease management process, and I actually had this with an agent who I was giving a mandate to market my property, is we went back 4 times where she said, oh, Robin, you haven't signed where I scratched out at clause 5. So then I had to go and re-sign that, reinitial, send it back. Then she comes back and says, oh, I've forgot this. I now need to do it again. And it went back and forth because it was not professional. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is one of South Africa's prime franchises. So again, I'm like, we can do so much better than that. So I'll definitely look at those. I mean, you can do things like Adobe. They have online stuff, DocuSign. So I'm giving away some of the ones which you can definitely use, and then you just need to figure out how to use it. They obviously are paid for most of them, but wow, especially when you're going into multiple leases, you want it really easy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Robin. I think that covers most of those questions. And in terms of some of your systems, am I correct by saying that some of those systems that you do use are within, because someone's asking about, do we have a systems course within the academy? Well, we have Robin Boots Airbnb course, and within your Airbnb course are the systems. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely in that Airbnb course. I mean, you know that they're the templates given of what to message, when to message, how many days after messaging, how do the cleaners get the automated messages, all those different things, 100% are all there in the Airbnb section. Yes.
Awesome. Robin, thank you very much. Go out there, get your surfboard, and get chilling this afternoon.
Excellent. Great. Thanks, guys. Good chatting to you.
Thank you
Cheers.
so much, Robin. Cheers, eh? Hallo, Leonora. Hoe gaan dit?
Hello there, doing well in yourself?
I'm very, very good, thanks. Thanks for joining us
Okay.
for the Q&A session.
It's my pleasure. So I had a lot of questions, and I see some of them were scratched off. So I hope that they were the ones that were answered.
Yes. So what we did, just to explain, so some of those questions were quite basic, and I got Nico to answer them. So Nico, your friend, answered some of the basic ones. There's quite a few for you. So what I suggest is let me just finish up with Ross, and then we'll finish up with you and Nico on the legal side. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
I can see Ross is itching to go have a glass of wine.
Okay. No problem. I'll wait.
Okay, cool. So Ross, a quick question from Tommy was about the monthly subscription fee. Do people do it as a pay-as-you-go, a once-off, or is it based on rental collection? How does it work?
Yeah, so typically an estate agent would charge you upfront, and which is the placement fee, and then there's a management component for a monthly basis. So with preferential, you pay as you go. So on a monthly basis, there's a fee that we charge. There's no upfront, so if the tenant vacates early, you don't lose. Another benefit that I probably should have touched on is in our lease agreement, you'll find that typically with an estate agent, they've got a clause in there that if the existing tenant decides to buy your property, they immediately get a commission of, normally it's around 5 to 7% of the value of that sale, even though they haven't done anything. They've literally just placed the tenant in. So with preferential, we've taken out that clause. So it sort of just protects landlords. I haven't done anything to convince that tenant that this property is really the place where he wants to start his family. So if he wants to buy that from the owner, what gives us the right to say, because the property tenant was placed by me, I now need to immediately get a commission on that. So we've taken that out. And then I think in terms of some of the services, like we don't get this a lot because there's so much value that we provide to landlords, but you can request that we only do tenant vetting. It's a tedious process. So on tenant vetting alone, we charge a single price. So yeah, that's a cost that as you go, you basically pay for that service. But most of the time, landlords take on the low fee of 2.75.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. And do you also do this for rooms as multi-lets? So yes, preferentials predominantly buy-to-lets, or we're going down the road of multi-lets as well?
Yeah, I think I want to cover that multi-let with the viewing component. So multi-lets, we did touch base on the back rooms. So multi-lets definitely we do cover, but remember it's per lease agreement. And then we do cover the whole of South Africa because it's a digital platform. We've got landlords in Cape Town, Durban, Joburg. Some landlords manage their properties through preferential from Ireland. We've got London, there's Dubai, Australia. So yeah, it's all over the world. Landlords utilizing the preferential services.
Okay, brilliant. Because there was a question there, which is great. Let's talk about eviction costs. So on a separate conversation with Expello, this is Tammy. Expello said to Tammy that it costs about 30 to 50,000 rand to evict a tenant, contested or not. So if it gets that point, does preferential cover that?
Absolutely, yes. We cover that. That's our partnership with Expello, and that's how we built our preferential promise around that. The idea is to really give landlords peace of mind. So the short answer is yes.
Okay, brilliant. Tommy's also asking, where do you source that information about tenants? Credit bureaus don't update rent payments, especially when they are good payers.
Now, look, obviously we've got the access to TPN, so most of the time you will basically see tenants there's a direct relationship between a tenant paying their rent and a tenant paying all their accounts. You would never find a tenant just paying their rent and not paying their accounts, or vice versa. So we've, and our team has experienced this, so we pick it up. We do thorough checking on that. And then also in the bank statements, you'll see that there's a line item typically that states rent payment or rental or the property address. And you can see that going out every month, around about the same 2-3 days apart, either before or after month end.
Okay, cool. Deborah was just asking, in terms of, I think, the vision and the future of Preferential, will Preferential expand into managing viewings for properties, especially when I cannot show the property to prospective tenants?
Yeah, this is a version 2.0 of Preferential we're working on. So we're already starting to talk with estate agents. How do we activate a typical viewings or inspections service to our landlords? Because we've got a lot of landlords that utilize Preferential for the management, and then they activate, they use estate agents to do the viewings on their behalf. So at the current model, what we're saying is, if a landlord needs viewings, they're more than open to utilize, they can utilize an estate agent to do the viewings, but in that discussion with the estate agent, just clearly stipulating that they will purely do the placement and that they'll be using Preferential to do the management on their behalf. In that, you get the benefit of our lease agreement. No, there's not that commission clause, etc. But in the future, we are looking at expanding into photography, property viewings, and also the inspections.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ross. Now, that pretty much covers all the questions. There's one or two in there, but we've covered that already, which is fantastic. So, Rossa, from my side, the Academy, thanks for your time. People know how to contact you. Go to SAPIN Connect and connect with Ross. He's got a team waiting for you to contact them. Any last comments, Ross?
No, just thanks for today. And I do think that these sessions and weekends really added value to a lot of the property investors. And looking forward to helping more landlords. Thanks, Andrew.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ross. Everyone say well done and thank you to Ross. That's excellento. Say bye. Now we have the serious people, the people that eat steak at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Steak for breakfast.
That is it. Now, you will notice that there are some line items that are in bold and other line items that are not. Can I make a suggestion for the two of you so we can get through this, because there's loads? The ones in bold are the ones Nico said he wants to answer, which are the easy questions, or the difficult questions are for you, Leonora. So if we start at the top of that page, read the question, Leonora. Now, obviously, because of time, if it only requires a short answer, be short to the point. If you do need to explain it, that's absolutely fine. And so if you start at line item number 5, how does one become a conveyancer? And as you get to the first bold one there is line 15 by Kerry. We can let Nico jump in.
Okay, so we've got a lot of questions, Nico, so let's go for it. How does one become a conveyancer? With a lot of determination and hard work. So a conveyancer is an admitted attorney as well. You cannot be a conveyancer without being an attorney. So obviously you have to do your degree, do your exams, and then you become a conveyancer. The next question I could not understand. And then the question from Mukati says that offers given by My Roof, are they binding? People? All contracts are binding, no matter how and where. Although some people, they just disregard contracts. If you sign the contract, you are bounded to the agreement to perform in terms thereof. You cannot just disregard a contract if you've signed it. That's why you need to have exit clause to exit it legally. Okay, so all contracts are binding. Tommy asked me, this is a good question, because I actually had this very unfortunate incident myself on a transaction. She wants to know what happens if the seller agreed to let the tenant go and after transfer the tenant refused to vacate. The property is sold, the seller has the money, but now as the buyer facing eviction cost and so on. This is a litigious matter, so this is how it works. In my very horrible scenario, which is a true life story, I had a matter where I asked the seller, what is the status on the occupant? It was a matter where the property was bought on auction, and he said to me very clearly, there's no problem. We have an agreement with the occupant. they will vacate the moment that we confirm registration. He confirmed with me that the occupant had alternative accommodation with the brother's property. All has been sorted. So I said, okay, can I please keep back 1 month's rent? So we kept back 1 month's rent for this overbridging time, for giving notice and moving out and so on. People, that occupant turned around and has not vacated the property as yet. So it is, if the contract stipulates it's this, the seller shall give vacant occupation, it remains the seller's responsibility, which means that the seller will remain liable for occupational rent towards the purchaser. So this purchaser was very upset with me because she said to me, I told you you're not allowed to pay out the purchase price to the seller. I said, but I cannot do that. I put the property in your name. I must pay the seller the purchase price. It's how it goes. If you buy bread, you give money, you take your bread, you leave. This is exactly the same. But the problem, but there are other legal remedies that she has, and also litigious procedures that has to be followed. So in this instance, my nightmare transaction is that I held back 1 month occupational rent, which I paid over to the purchaser at registration and say, listen, the month has passed now, here's your month occupational rent. And then the occupant still hasn't vacated. It remains the seller's responsibility to evict that occupant, because he was supposed to keep vacant occupation. So if the seller now decides, the purchaser, so now the seller does nothing. So the purchaser can incur legal costs to do the eviction, but he will have a claim for damages against the seller and say, you were supposed to give me vacant occupation, you did not. It took me 4 months to evict these people. I am looking to you, the seller, for 4 months occupational rent, which will be damages suffered. It's not, you will not claim that, you will claim it as damages. And this is the cost for the eviction, which I'll also claim back from you. Unfortunately, it's still a nightmare matter. So I hope I answered that one. Yes, if you keep the tenants, when does the seller transfer the tenant deposit? So usually what we do, if it's with a letting agent, the purchaser can decide whether they continue the arrangement with the letting agent. But if it's a private letting, I will agree with the seller to deduct the deposit from the proceeds and refund it to the purchaser. That's how I deal with it. Please explain the 72 hours to refuse or take another better offer. So that is the continuous marketing clause. So the continuous marketing clause works as follows. It says, and that is actually the clause that's applicable when one of the suspensive conditions is that the purchaser shall, subject to the selling of the purchaser's existing property. That is, those two clauses usually run together. That is usually subject to a bond, selling to, then 2, subject to existing property, and then 3, it's the continuous marketing clause. So how it works as follows. So you can, as owner, continue to market the property and accept other offers. That is what the clause says. Then, when you've got, and they call the second offer a competitive offer, when that bond is approved, that bond must be 100% in place. It must not be subject to anything else. That transaction must be ready to go. Then what we do is, and the agents don't really know how to deal with this. It's usually the conveyancer that does this. So what we do is we go to the purchaser, the first purchaser, and say, Mr. First Purchaser, in terms of this clause, we have a competing offer, a competitive offer. Attach here to the proof of the bond that has been approved, a proof of the bond that has been approved. Then you say to the purchaser, you've got 72 hours to, 1, either waive all suspensive conditions, which will be the obtaining of a bond and the selling of your existing property, or deliver proof within 72 hours that 1, you've got 100% bond, and 2, that your property has been sold with a bond approval, or that you waive the condition. But there's a snag to that one. The purchaser might say, this is not purchaser number 1, say, oh, okay, you know what, I don't want to sell my property then any longer. I would rather then rent it out. But the catch is, if the bank approved that purchaser's bond subject to the cancellation of the existing bond, then he can waive that condition. It's not going to change because it's still a condition of the bond. So basically what happens, if that purchaser number 1 cannot comply with these 2 conditions, the contract lapses automatically, becomes null and void, and you just proceed with your second offer that goes on. The agent on the first offer cannot claim any agent's commission from you. There's no claim against the parties for each other. Yeah, so I hope I've answered that one. Why does the CC state sales take longer to register? So it's not, well, it depends on, one, was the deceased estate reported at the time when the property was put in the market? So in effect, in real life, you're not supposed to, you cannot sell the property before a letter of executorship has been issued for the deceased estate. That's number 1. So the seller or the executor must have the letter of appointment, and then they can sell the property, and it's supposed to be transferred directly from the deceased estate. So sometimes what happens, people get confused, and all depends also, most probably scenarios might differ, but with deceased estates, if you transfer to a beneficiary of the estate first and the beneficiary sells it on, that is when it takes long. Because then you cannot transfer to the beneficiary before the estate is in place, which means that the advertisements must be placed, the liquidation and distribution account must be approved. It must have laid for inspection for 21 days, and then they can transfer to the beneficiary, and from the beneficiary can sell it on. If that is the process that they are following, then it can take extremely long, because this first part has to fall in place. But I always advise, if it's possible, it all depends on the circumstances and how the estate is structured, I would advise to sell it directly out of the estate. Directly out of the estate. And then it's a straightforward transfer. The difference is your seller is the executor. There will be a condition that says this contract, and this is a subject clause, people remember. This transaction is subject to the consent from the Master of the High Court in terms of section 42(1). So, but then it's just an application you lodge at the Master's office, they endorse it, and you just proceed with the transfer. So, it's just an extra step, not supposed to take longer, but as I say, you have to look at each scenario. That one I don't understand. Okay, so at the fall of the hammer, the property is yours and the tenants vandalize it. What happens? People, that happens, it's your risk. So when the fall of the hammer and the people vandalize it, remember, I assume that Tommy is talking here about sheriff sales. This happens. I mean, it happened to a client of mine. He bought a very nice property on auction, over the moon, very good area, beautiful place, and he negotiated with the occupant not to do an eviction, a relocation fee. People, that guy moved out, the owner of the house. He took everything. Everything. He did not roll up the carpets. That he did not do. He took the kitchen. He took all the cupboards. He took the light fittings. It was absolutely horrific. With if it's a sheriff auction, then with the fall of the hammer, unless you're going to do a calculated risk, because I'm walking away. My client wanted to walk away. He wanted to say to the sheriff, go take this property, sell it again on auction. But what we managed to do is we calculated a break-even amount, and we sold it on for a break-even amount, just not to lose the commission and stuff. So that's what we did in our transaction. But the risk passes to you with the fall of the hammer. I've got another transaction where my client, I think he bought the property on sheriff auction and he did not go and view the property. I don't know what happened. And he just sent me a message and said, walk away, inform the attorneys, I'm not proceeding with this transaction. So yeah, footwork. I hope I answered that one. So the risk goes over to you. Terry, that's yours now, Niku.
There we go. So Kerry is saying, does the agent have to put the seller's details first or only after you completed your details? So now my understanding is there's a process, and you need to look at the process. If we're completing an offer to purchase, the person purchasing the property or wanting to purchase the property is going to complete the offer first, because he's going to say, I'm willing to pay for this property X amount of money, and this is my terms of that. That then goes to the seller, who can then sign the document in either an acceptance of the terms that was given by the person providing the offer, and then they obviously need to agree with the agent what the agent's commission is going to be. So there's going to be 3 people completing it, and first of all is going to be the person purchasing the property under normal circumstances completing this document first. So no, I don't see that the seller needs to put his details on the document on the OTP first. That's definitely not something, unless you disagree with me, Leonora.
No, you're all right.
Great.
Next question from Kerry is, does water damage fall under foot stewards? Okay, so people remember latent and patent defects, defects that you can see with the eye, defects that you cannot see with the eyes. So if there was severe water damage, if there was severe water damage that you could see, it was there with proper inspection. That's the measurement. With proper inspection, you could have seen there is water damage. And obviously also with the property listing, if you're buying through an estate agent, they are supposed to disclose all of that. If you as the purchaser did not stipulate in the agreement that the water damage must be fixed, repaired with certificates and stuff, then it will fall under foot stewards. Then the seller is going to be protected. So sometimes what happens, when I started with my articles many years ago, and I had a nightmare matter where the seller actually did not disclose that the roof was leaking like a sieve. He did not disclose it. And obviously he sold his house in the winter. He repainted the walls to make it a very neat and sellable house. And then when the summer came, it was pouring into the roof. So what happened is that now the purchaser comes to the conveyancer. It's like you did the transfer, you must sort this out. I said, okay, I did the paperwork, but let me see what I can do for you. And so I asked the purchaser, please obtain for me a report from an expert that did a proper inspection of the roof. And when the report came back, the report said that the damage in the roof was so bad. It was definitely old damage, and the seller should have known about it. And once you've got that, I mean, what is the seller going to say? The seller cannot turn around and say, I never knew the roof was leaking like a sieve. I mean, really? I stayed there for 10 years. What's the chance that it will rain with the first rain everywhere? You know? So what was the question? Does water damage fall under foot stewards? Yes, it depends on full disclosure. If it was fully disclosed and you did not demand for it to repair, it falls under foot stewards. If it was not disclosed and the seller knew about it, then unfortunately you will have to go the route. So what did that purchaser have to do? He had to summons the seller for the cost to repair the roof, and then it becomes litigious. Okay. The next one of Atali is yours, Niku.
There we go. So Atali is asking, do all banks give 100% bonds or not, or 104% bonds? So this is obviously a service that they do provide at the bank. They do give bonds, but there's criteria that needs to be met in order for them to say, this is what we will give you, either a 100% loan to value, 104%. I know that for argument's sake, ABSA would give you 104, but I think you need to have an NQF level of 9 before they would actually even consider giving you that. So there is criteria that needs to be looked after, in order to give you that answer. And you would need to discuss that with each bank, and therefore maybe consider using a bond originator, and they will give you a response. Then the next question was, if there is an existing tenant on the property, must the tenant stay on until the lease expires? So my answer would be, what does the lease agreement say, right? In the event that the property is sold, are they allowed to be given a notice of 2-month period, or does it state that there's only a lease agreement for a time? So this is hier gaat voorkoop. If I remember correctly, Leonora, this would obviously that the tenant would need to stay until the lease expires, and you need to give proper notice if you want them to come out of that lease agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Next one was, how long does it take to register a PTY? Well, we've done it within 24 hours, but I would put about 48 hours. But if there's a delay, it can take about 4 to 5 days, but that's business days excluding weekends. So that can be done fairly quickly. How can I write to give me an exit clause? Or what can I write to give me an exit clause? And I think that's also kind of been covered by Leonora during the day. I think it also comes down to, raising finance would be an exit clause that you can use. You can actually be very specific about the terms that you would like for that raising finance, that it needs to be a bond, that it needs to be over 30 years, and that it needs to be at a specific interest rate. And then you can also make it subject to the clause of obviously having a building inspection done, and that the inspection is favorable. So all of that would just need to be written into the offer to purchase when you consider that.
Okay. Then Natalie asked, how much does it cost to have the eviction done? A lot of money, I think. That is more litigious. I'm not so sure about that. Natalie, Bruno, they do the evictions and the stuff on the legal side. I don't want to price it, but it's not small change. It's definitely not 10,000. It might be more. I'd rather not comment on that one. I don't know if Bruno has previously mentioned that one, but it's a lot of money. Why does the bank have a reserve price in some instances? In some instances, mostly it's with the sheriff auctions. Well, they must have they have a reserve price to make sure that they get the minimum amount. So what on their books, what they require. So what happens is that if you know what the outstanding bond is, the banks might accept between 65 and 70% of the outstanding bond amount. So when they go on auction, the representative for the bank will be there to make sure that the bid is raised to their minimum requirements, and then they can bid further. Is to make sure that the property is not sold it is to protect their own interest. I hope I've answered that one. Where are we now? Your turn now again.
Next one is from Atali again. What condition do I put in if I source a property and need to find an investor? So that's not necessarily a condition. I think it's just that most of the estate agents, OTPs, would say that you need to obtain a bond from a registered or raise finance from a registered credit provider. I would just take out the registered, because an investor might not be a registered credit provider, but just be a credit provider. And therefore, I would take that out of there. Is there anything that you would like to add on that, Leonora?
You know what? If you're going to look for an investor, rather just put in the obtaining of a bond. Mrs. Interruption here. So let me interrupt myself. So remember, not everybody knows this, but this is a fact, that the condition for the bond is a benefit for the purchaser. The purchaser is the one that can waive that condition. So the purchaser can decide whether they want to continue with the bond or not. So if we are looking for an investor for an exit clause, I would put in the obtaining of a bond. Then you can look for an investor. The investor might decide to rather put down a deposit and still apply for a bond. But if the investor is a cash buyer, then you can come back within the time period, and you can write an email to the conveyancer and say, listen, in terms of the contract, I'm supposed to get a bond for 500,000 Rand by the 30th of June. I hereby waive the condition. Kindly provide me with your banking details. I've got the 500,000 deposit from your investor. Did I answer? Then you work it that way around. Yeah. Nico, do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Is there one? Who's up now?
No, it would be with regards to how does the new Spluma Act affect the OTP? So that's also an interesting discussion. All that I know is that with regards to the Spluma Act, there's quite a bit of responsibilities that is the seller's responsibility in the sale. And what I would then make use of is to say, well, in the case that, for argument's sake, that you need to provide building plans, the seller needs to provide you with that information up front, right? And if they can't, you use that to your benefit in order to say that you would, if they don't provide it, you would want to renegotiate the purchase price because there's additional costs. So I currently use this Pluma Act more for negotiation space, to try and get the price reduced, especially because most of the sellers are, first of all, not aware of it, that they have to be, responsible for these type of things. And on top of that, I think most of them is not in place in any case, and therefore it's going to be a costly exercise to get it. So I use that to my advantage.
Can I just add something there? I just want to say Spluma at this stage is not something that's being enforced by in Gauteng. It is our challenges currently in Limpopo and Mpumalanga. So if we have to, so the process of Spluma is that you cannot get your rates figures before you can get, and a Spluma certificate has to be lodged in the deeds office, not in the Pretoria, not in the Johannesburg, Cape Town so far, also not, haven't done one recently in Bloemfontein or in Natal, but Mpumalanga and Limpopo, there's no, it's Spluma, and it takes really long. It really takes really long. I think this one of Yvette is also yours, Niku.
Yeah, so she's saying, if buying many properties as professionals, can we insist on using our own attorneys? So yeah, you can insist, but it's not to say that the seller is going to accept it. And it's kind of the default that it is the seller's, place to say this is the attorney they would want to use. But I suppose, once again, an OTP is something that you can negotiate, right? Anything that you can negotiate between a seller and a purchaser is something that you can agree on, and you can put that into the OTP. And if you don't want to use theirs and that is a deal breaker, then you walk away from the deal. But if you feel that you still want to keep the deal and they insist on using their own attorneys, then use it. Once again, you can go back by saying, but I'm getting discounts, so can we at least get a quotation from that attorneys and see what the cost is? If it is very much more, can you reduce the price again? So there's quite a lot of negotiation can take place with that aspect. But it's once again comes down to what you can negotiate or not.
Okay. There was another question which I saw, was somebody asked that must the back-to-back transactions be dealt with by the same attorneys? So I would say that if it's a private transaction and that you've bought, and you can convince your seller that one attorney does the transfer, I would recommend that when you sell it on, that it stays with the same attorney. It's easier. But in all my instances, with all my speculants, the first transaction is usually managed by the sheriff attorneys, the foreclosure attorneys, and I still do the back-to-back on it. So I liaise with them directly the whole time. It's when you sell it on that you have the choice then who does your transaction. And that is good when you have a good relationship with your attorney that knows how to manage these two transactions, because obviously using Peter's money to pay Paul on this side. So yeah. Then Yvette also asked, can you put a building inspection as a suspensive, which can also function as an exit clause? Yes, you can definitely do that. Make sure that you word it well. And also you can also do that as part of the due diligence. And then this one is also yours, Nico?
Yeah, so what risks occur when you renovate or refurbish prior to registration? So this is also like a discussion to have, but at the end of the day, if something do go sour in your agreement and you've now spent quite a lot of the money, the chance of you getting that money back is questionable, is maybe the best word that I'm going to put in there. So I would really say you need to be 100% sure about the fact that the transfer will continue and that all paperwork is in place and that you have everything, securities sorted before you consider spending money on a property and then losing out on that money.
Yeah. With Andrew, bring me on in. There we go.
There we go. Geez, how's all those questions, eh? Are you guys okay?
Yeah. No, they're good. They all paid attention during the class.
Exactly, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, Leonora. And let's hope that a lot of these students do actually take up that OTP course, because there's
Yes.
so much knowledge and information in there where a lot of these things will be covered, right?
It is important. Must do that. And then we'll meet again.
Absolutely. And Leonora, thank you for your time, especially on a Sunday. Everyone, say thank you. Well done. And thank you for your time. And of course, when they do property transactions, buying or selling, they're going to think of you and Bruno first.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you for having me.
Awesome. It is a pleasure. And we'll see you soon. Excellent. Now, Nico.
Yes, Andrew.
Can you see my screen? So I don't go on without sharing my screen. I did it twice in a row.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. So you may as well stay on with me, Nico, because why not, eh?
Oh, why not? I'll stay with you.
Thanks for your wealth of knowledge with all those questions. Now, just to ask the audience, so tell me, everyone, before we announce who's going to win the cash flow game, who would recommend us, the Property Academy, the SA Property Investors Network, who has actually got value from this weekend? And if you were talking to friends, if you were talking to colleagues, and they asked you how this weekend was, who would actually recommend this weekend? You would say, yes, fantastic. I recommend the Academy and I recommend the SA Property Investors Network. Let's just see what they say there, Nico.
Yeah.
Any comments from your side, Nico?
From my side, I definitely would recommend this to anyone, just because of the fact that there's such a wide angle and wide variety of topics that's actually been discussed over a weekend like this. So if you're a property investor, you're not on these things, I think you're staying out of touch of the current happenings within the property investment journey. So definitely.
Absolutely. So here's the thing, everyone. If you would recommend the SA Property Investors Network or the Academy, please go into social media and let other South Africans know that we do exist. Let's see how we can help them along their property journey. There are so many South Africans right now that have not heard about the signature solution. And they all go to point number 6. It's a fact. They'll all go to point number 6. They'll submit an offer, have no idea what they're signing. They've got no plan, no strategy, no idea. And unfortunately, most of them lose money. So help them by letting them know about the information hub. So can you please all go to social media, tag in the SA Property Information Hub, tag in the Property Academy, and let people know about us. Okay, we all good with that. So coming to the cash flow game. Wow, this was like an internal battle. Who's going to win? A few names came up. And we're thinking, geez, who's done the most amount? Who's been the most active? So let's see. Okay, Audrey says, I will be posting a video talking about it on your Facebook. Brilliant. 1 minute video. Great. Kerry says this was very valuable. Well done. Clifford says 100% you'd recommend SAPIN and TPA any day. Atali says, yes, you would. Fantastic. Okay, let's come back to who is going to win the cash flow game. Still in its wrapper, brand new. A game that can change a kid's life forever just by playing it once. So, drum roll, Nico. Give me a drum roll, please. The drum roll is Audrey. Well done, Audrey.
Congratulations, Audrey.
Done. There we go, Audrey Mapela. Okay, I'm going to give it a few seconds for it to catch up. Hey, Nico, action takers always get rewarded. That's what we do in the one-day workshops.
It's been proven over and over again, 100%, Andrew.
There we go, Audrey. Whoop, whoop. Just busy catching up. Well done. So, Nico, Dave, or Ati will get you details. Give us your address. We're going to post that to you. And Audrey, when you do play it, I don't know if you do have kids or nieces or nephews or friends with kids, you must take a photograph and you must tag in the Property Academy. Okay. Thank you very much for that. And congratulations, everyone, for completing the signature solution. It's taken us 2 full days, loads of questions and answers, loads of value. Congratulations. Now make sure that every single one of you get out there and you take action. A quick message from Alani. Yes, Robin Booth and the Academy have done a joint venture with the Airbnb course. Please note that when we offered you option 1 and we offered you option 2 in terms of the packages, the course in option 1 is the SA fundamental course or the flipping course. It does not include the Airbnb course, and neither does option 2. Option 2, remember, is the group coaching and the blueprint and the SA fundamental course or the flipping. The Airbnb course sits over there, which is on the Academy's website. There's a beginner part for the Airbnb course, and there's the advanced Airbnb course, and that can be bought as a standalone product through the Property Academy's website under online courses. Okay, so any last comments from anyone? Any last comments? Because, ladies and gents, in fact, I've got one last comment before we go. One last comment. So I said to you yesterday morning by 3 p.m., it's now 20 past 3, that myself, the speakers, the coaches, the content, we're going to help you adjust and adapt to change your mindset as to how you look at property. Have any of you, would any of you agree with that? Have we changed or shifted your mindset as to how you look at property? Have you got value from this weekend? Daryl, fantastic. So many golden nuggets. Okay, Tommy's saying first poll results. The back-end team will sort that out for you. Tommy says, well spent weekend indeed. Pooty, what a great boot camp. We enjoyed and learned. Fantastic. Some great, even myself, I want to go back and listen to a few of those speakers myself, because you can never know everything. And even though I've been doing this for a long time, and Nico and Dave, every time I hear these speakers, I pick up a golden nugget, something new, which is great. Okay, so Nico, is there anything from your side?
Yeah, so I would just like to say, it's always fun and exciting to listen to you. It's never a dull or boring moment. So I think everyone online should also just say thank you, Andrew, for being the host for this weekend.
Thank you, Nico. Thank you. I appreciate that, man. Anger's asking a question as well, Nico. How much to upgrade, Anger? It's 1,000 Rand. If you want to get the recordings, the videos, all the downloadables, just contact the team, pay the 1,000 Rand, and you'll get access to that. And thank you to my team. Nico, thank you for being there. Dave, thank you for being in the background. Ati, thank you for putting all this together. Ati's been working very hard for weeks to bring the speakers together, to get the presentations, to get everything. So thank you, Ati, for your work, and Dave, and Nico, and myself. It's teamwork. Alani and Daniel as our consultants, thank you for being there for the clients and taking their questions and helping them move forward. Remember, even if you wake up tomorrow or tonight and you really want to get a property coach, or you really want to take a package or whatever it might be, Alani and Daniel are there to support you. All righty, I don't see anything else, Nico.
No, it looks like that's a wrap, or how would David normally put it? Let's put a bow on this.
Yeah, David say, let's put a bow on this. Thank you very much, team. Been an awesome session, awesome time, and I want to see those entries into Investor of the Year 2021. I want to see every single one of you on that stage. See you all soon.